the rest of the video and PowerPoint slides on chapter 2, especially the parts that talked about DNA, RNA, ATP, and ADP, ATP, DNA, RNA. So you familiarize yourself with all of those nucleotides, adenine, guanine, cytosine, thymine, the difference between DNA, RNA, and so on. So I don't know how many of you managed to do that. Can I see a thumbs up or by show of hands if you managed to go through that video or PowerPoints to familiarize yourself with DNA, RNA, and so on, like we asked you to? Can I see by show of hands or by thumbs up if you did? Okay, I see that Felicia did. Okay, that's good. Anybody else managed to go through the material on DNA, RNA to get to pick out the differences, and also ATP and AGP like we asked you to? Anybody else apart from Felicia? Okay, TK, it would be good if you put your full names so that when we download the attendance lists from MS Teams, we know who you are, because TK abbreviation doesn't tell me who you are. But I see your hand, and okay, you did go through the material. That's fine. TK, I would suggest you log out, and when you log back in, type your full names so that when we download the attendance list, it shows your names, not just the TK. We don't know who TK is. Okay, great. So we're not going to go back to chapter 2. There is just one aspect of chapter 2 that I would like to highlight, and that is just a question that was asked that we try to answer. Someone asked a question on atoms and molecules, and we'll try to answer that question. And I made a video on that. So it's just about 7.5 minutes or thereabout. So let me share that video so that you can get to see how that particular question was answered. I have a question that I would like us to have a look at today. And this question is one of the questions that you will find in most of the question papers, either for semester test 1 or in your main or supplementary examination. And so it's very important if you can understand what's going on here and to get a handle of how these values are determined or calculated. The question says, consider the following information about 3 atoms of an element. So here we have carbon 6, carbon 12, carbon 13, and carbon 14. So the element here is carbon, and there are 3 variations of carbon. Now let's look at the question 1.1.1. It says, how many neutrons are present in the atom of this carbon here, carbon 14? Now, there are 2 numbers you'll find here. The subscript being 6 and the superscript being 14. What the subscript at the bottom here represents is the atomic number. And what the superscript at the top here represents is the atomic mass. So if you want to find a neutron, how do you calculate the neutron from here? To get a neutron, you have to understand that the atomic mass is equal to the sum of the proton and the neutron. So if you add the proton and the neutron, that gives you the atomic mass. And how do you find the proton? Very interesting. You have to understand also that the number of proton is equal to the atomic number. What is the atomic number here? The atomic number is a number at the bottom here, the subscript, that is 6. So if 6 is your atomic number and 14 is your atomic mass, how do you find the neutrons? If proton plus neutron is atomic mass and proton is 6, it then follows that your neutron will be the atomic mass minus the number of protons. So 14 minus 6, and that gives you 8. And that's how we got 8 here. Atomic mass minus the number of protons will give you the number of neutrons. Because if you add the neutrons and the protons, that gives you the atomic mass, which in this case is 14. So our answer here, number of neutrons is 8. Now to the next question, 1.1.2. How many electrons does the atom of this carbon here contain? And this is carbon 13. How many electrons does it contain? For you to know the number of electrons, you need to know the number of protons. And to know the number of protons, you need to know the atomic number. Remember we said the atomic number, which is given here being 6, is equal to the number of protons. Something interesting and important you also need to remember is that the number of protons is always equal to the number of electrons. So if the number of protons is 6, and that is your atomic number, as we see here in the subscript, it then means that there will be 6 electrons in this carbon. So the number of protons is equal to the number of electrons, and if the number of protons is 6, then there will be 6 electrons, and that is how we got 6 here. Which leads us to the next question. How many protons are present in the atom of carbon 12? Carbon 12, because this 12 represents the atomic number. Now, for this carbon here, the number of protons is always equal to the atomic number. And since our atomic number here is given as 6, it means that the number of protons is what? 6. So that's how we got our 6 here. The next question, 1.1.4, says, what is the atomic weight of carbon 12? Now, this is also very interesting. To understand atomic weight, you need to understand isotopes, which we'll talk about shortly. But here we have 6 as the atomic number, which is the number of protons, and we have 12 as the atomic mass. Now, how do you find the atomic weight here? Atomic weight is generally considered to be the atomic mass of the most abundant isotope. So in carbon, for instance, you have carbon 12, carbon 13, carbon 14. And there's a way to determine the most abundant isotope. However, in this case, we are not told which is the most abundant isotope. So, generally speaking, carbon 12 is regarded as the most abundant isotope. And so, the atomic mass of the most abundant isotope would be carbon 12. So the atomic weight will be 12. But in the exam, we're not going to penalize you if you don't know what the atomic weight, what the most abundant isotope is, except you are told somewhere. But if we give you a question like this, what is the atomic weight of carbon 12? I expect you to use the atomic number of that particular isotope of carbon that you're given to represent the atomic weight. So if the atomic number here, if the atomic mass of carbon 12 here is 12, it then means that for this question, you would then represent the atomic weight as 12. And that's why we have 12 over here. Now let's go to the final question, which says, what are the members of such a group of atoms called? Obviously, they are isotopes. Isotopes are those groups of atoms that have the same atomic number as you see at the top here, carbon. They all have the same atomic number as 6, but they have different atomic mass. Here we have atomic mass 12, atomic mass 13, atomic mass 14, but the atomic number remains the same across board. So which makes this group of atoms to be isotopes. So whenever you see an atom with different variations, each one having the same atomic number but different atomic mass, you know that they belong to a group known as isotopes. Okay, I hope that explains this question. Thank you. So that's just to help explain that question. TK, I see your hand is up. Do you have a question? Okay. So what I want to do now is to, okay, first of all, we're done with chapter 2. We will do the summary when we have the face-to-face class next week. For now, I want to go to chapter 3, so that when we summarize chapter 2 next week, if we have to, we can go over some of what we have for chapter 3 as well. But for now, I want to start off with chapter 3, and so we can go through the presentation. Okay, so I'm going to share screen now, and then we go into chapter 3. Chapter 3 is about cells and tissues, and the presentation is going to explain what we're going to cover under chapter 3. Okay. We shall be talking about cells and tissues. And under this topic, we shall look at the generalized structure of a cell. We shall look at the different cellular organelles. We shall talk about different transport processes that allow the movement of substances in and out of the cell through the cell membrane. So we shall look at both active processes and passive processes, and we shall talk about bulk transport. And then we shall talk about cell division and look at the different processes involved with cell division. And we'll look at mitotic cell division and the different stages of mitosis. We shall also talk about meiosis, and we shall look at the events that happen during cell division. So that's the first part of cells and tissue under chapter 3 that we shall look at. And then after that, we'll now talk about body tissues, and we'll start classifying the different types of body tissues that we have. So let's get to it. Cells and tissue. Of course, we know that cells are the basic structural units of the body. They carry out all chemical activities that are needed to sustain life, and they're the building blocks of all living organisms. We're all made of millions and millions of cells, and different tissues are just groups of cells coming together to perform similar functions. Okay. So whatever a body part can do is the result of activities within its cells. The human body is composed entirely of cells, the product of cells, and the various body fluids. An adult human body consists of about 75 trillion cells. All cells have got a lot in common, but they also differ. The cells in different tissues, they vary, okay? They vary in size, they vary in shape, they vary in structure, they also vary in their functions. Although most cells contain basically the same elements, but those elements or cellular organelles will be dependent on the function of the cells within the tissue. So the cell shape are closely, and the organelles they contain are closely related to their functions. For instance, you will find that a nerve cell is long, it's thread-like, has got thread-like extensions because it can transmit nerve impulses. Epithelial cells, on the other hand, are thin, flattened, and tightly packed because they serve as protective shield within the body. Whereas your muscle cells could be slender, rod-like, and the ends are attached to the parts they pull together. And they pull parts closely together because that is their function. So we will look at the overview of the cellular basis of life. Cells are made up primarily of 4 elements: carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen, plus smaller amounts of iron, sodium, calcium, potassium, and iodine. These small amounts or trace amounts are vitally important for certain functions. So living cells are about 60% water, and the reason is because water is very essential for life. Also, all body cells are constantly bathed in a dilute saltwater solution called interstitial fluid, which is derived from blood. So interstitial fluid is the fluid you find around body cells. And all exchanges between cells and blood are made through the interstitial fluid. So let's look at the anatomy of a generalized cell. When we talk about generalized cell, understand that there are millions and millions of cells in the body. Now, these cells do not look alike. A bone cell looks totally different from a blood cell or a hair cell or a skin cell or a muscle cell. But some of the organelles they contain could be similar. So when we talk about a generalized cell, although cells do not look the same depending on their functions, but there are certain features that are common to all cells. There are certain organelles that all cells contain. And when we look at a typical cell, which we call a generalized cell, we want to look at what a typical cell will look like and what it will contain in terms of its organelles. So that's why we talk about a generalized cell. So we're generalizing here to say this is what a typical cell looks like. And these are the typical types of organelles that basically cells should contain. So let's look at the structure of the structural anatomy of a generalized cell. First of all, you'll find that all cells have got 3 main parts or regions. And these parts are the nucleus, the cell nucleus, and that is the inner portion enclosed by a nuclear envelope. So here is our nucleus here, right in the middle, and around it is it's shielded or covered by a nuclear envelope. Secondly, we have the cytoplasm. All cells will have a cytoplasm, and that is the space between the nucleus and the cell membrane. So that's our cytoplasm over here. All cells will have that. Also, there is the plasma membrane or cell membrane or cytoplasmic membrane, and that is the outer covering of the cell itself. So that's the plasma membrane or cell membrane or cytoplasmic membrane. And the plasma membrane encloses the cytoplasm and forms the outer boundary of the cell. Now let's look at some of these organelles we've just talked about, beginning with the nucleus. Where do we find the nucleus? The nucleus is located near the center of the cytoplasm. The nucleus in a cell is the control center of the cell and contains the genetic material, or DNA. It is the control center that directs activities of cells. It is enclosed in a nuclear envelope that consists of an inner and outer membrane. Okay. So in a nucleus, you have three regions. You have the nuclear envelope or membrane, which forms the outer boundary of the nucleus. Then right inside the nucleus, in the core of the nucleus, you have the nucleolus. Then we also have chromatins, which play a role during cell division. The nuclear membrane contains a jelly-like fluid called nucleoplasm, in which other structures float. These structures include A, the nucleolus, which we see here in the core of the nucleus. These are one or more small dark staining sites where ribosomes are formed. These ribosomes serve as the actual site for the synthesis of protein. So that's our nucleolus here, and that's the nuclear envelope that forms the outside boundary of the nucleus. B, we have the chromatin. It consists of loosely coiled fibers present in the nuclear fluid. When a cell is divided to form two daughter cells, the chromatin form rod-like bodies called chromosomes. Chromatin fibers are composed of protein and DNA molecules. And these chromosomes are important, and they're transmitted from generation to generation, okay? Because you find them within the nucleus. The nuclear envelope is the outer covering of the nucleus, the barrier of the nucleus, and consists of a double membrane and contains nuclear pores. Those pores are like holes that allow for exchange of material between the nucleus and the rest of the cell. Okay, so we've talked about the nucleoli that contain one or more the nucleus contains one or more nucleoli. So the nucleoli are found within the nucleus, and we said they are sites for ribosome assembly, and those ribosomes migrate into the cytoplasm through the nuclear pores. The chromatin we have described, they condense to form chromosomes when the cells divide, and they are scattered throughout the nucleus. You only find them in the cell when the cell is not dividing. And within the chromatin, they are composed of DNA and protein. Okay, now to the cell itself. We've talked about the nucleus, now the cell. The plasma membrane. The plasma or cell membrane it forms the barrier for cell content. So it forms the outer barrier for the cell contents. It maintains the wholeness of the cell and controls the movement of particles in and out of the cell. The plasma membrane is a fragile, transparent barrier that contains the cell contents. It separates them from the surrounding environment. It is composed mostly of protein and lipid or fat molecules. It is made up of a double phospholipid layer. So we have the hydrophilic head. Hydrophilic, it loves water, it leans towards water.
Hydrophobic tail, it shies away from water. It moves away from the water. So the head is hydrophilic, the tail is hydrophobic. The plasma membrane's function is mainly to maintain the wholeness of cell and control passage of materials in and out of the cell. Most of the lipid portion of the cell membrane is phospholipids. And of course, I've said that it has the hydrophilic head and hydrophobic tail. Okay, so the polar head is water loving and attracted to fluid or water. The non-polar tail are hydrophobic, they are water hating, they avoid water, and therefore they align themselves towards the center of the membrane. So if this is our plasma membrane, you will see the hydrophilic heads here and the hydrophobic tails hiding themselves away, right, from any fluid. Okay, so the heads love fluid, love water, because this is a water environment. The tails shy away, so it's towards the inside. Same here, hydrophilic head, hydrophobic tail. Okay, and these are proteins, and these proteins, this is called cholesterol here. So this allow movement of substances in and out of the cell, okay, through these proteins. And we shall talk about this movement later to see how the movements are carried out in and out of the cell. The cell membrane have got certain specializations. Specialization of the cell membrane or plasma membrane are commonly displayed by epithelial cells that line hollow body organs like the small intestine. Examples of some of the projections or specialization of the cell membrane include structures like the microvilli. These microvilli are tiny finger-like projections that increase the cell's surface area for absorption. Like if you look at a towel, the normal towel you use in the bathroom, it's got, this little, like, how do I describe it? Little projections from the towel, and these projections help with the absorption of water. They help to increase the surface area so it can dry you quickly and absorb water. So some cells have got those in their plasma membrane, finger-like projections that help to increase the surface area for absorption. And you find such kind of cells where absorption is needed, like in the linings of your intestine, small intestine, large intestine, so that digested food from the stomach, as it passes through the intestines, absorption can take place. The other thing you find is membrane junctions, which vary structurally depending on their role. Among them, you have the tight junctions, which are impermeable junctions that bind cells together into leak-proof sheets. They prevent substances from passing through intercellular spaces between cells. Then you have desmosomes, which are anchoring junctions that prevent cells from being pulled apart. And then, of course, we have gap junction. They are seen in the heart and between embryonic cells. Okay? They function mainly to allow communication, and they allow ions and nutrients such as sugar, amino acids, and nucleotides to be exchanged between them. So these are our microvilli that help to increase surface area for absorption. Tight impermeable junctions here, like you find in the skin, and these are gap junctions over here. Okay, so these here are desmosomes. Okay. So now we talk about the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is the cellular material outside the nucleus and inside the plasma membrane. It is the site of most cellular activities and can be thought of as the factory area of the cell, because that is where you have most of the cellular organelles. The cellular organelles are, the cytoplasmic organelles are these little organs in the cytoplasm, microscopic organs within the cytoplasm that are specialized cellular compartments, and they perform specific functions. Each of them performs its own job to maintain the life of the cell. So the cytoplasm contains these three major elements: the cytosol, the organelles, and the inclusions. The cytosols are fluids that suspend other elements. The organelles that we just talked about are metabolic machinery of the cell, and they are little organs that perform functions for the cell. The inclusions are chemical substances that are stored, like stored nutrient or cell products. So these are the three major elements of the cytoplasm. We are going to look at the cytoplasmic organelles. What are the organelles we find within the cytoplasm? What are their functions? So there are different types of these cellular organelles. So what we see here is basically the anatomy of a cell. It's been dissected so we can see the inside. Here is the nucleus, that's the nucleolus, there are chromatins, this is the cytoplasm, and you have lots and lots of cytoplasmic organelles within the cytoplasm. So this is the cell membrane, and you can see the microvilli and microfilaments here, which are projections of the cell membrane. There are also microtubules. And there are all sorts of organelles, and we're going to look at those organelles and the different functions. Let's start with the mitochondria. The mitochondria is regarded as the powerhouse of the cell. So mitochondrion, singular, mitochondria, plural. The mitochondria are powerhouses of the cell. They can change their shape continuously. They can carry out reactions where oxygen is used to break down food, and they provide ATP for cellular energy. Remember ATP, adenosine triphosphate. The other cellular organelle within the cytoplasm is the ribosome. The ribosome is made up of protein and RNA, and is the site for protein synthesis. You can find them in two locations. You find them floating freely in the cytoplasm, or as part of the rough endoplasmic reticulum. So let's go back and see. That's our rough endoplasmic reticulum, okay? And they contain ribosomes, or you can find the ribosomes floating freely. Okay. The next organelle is the endoplasmic reticulum. It is a fluid-filled tubule for carrying substances, so it's more like a transporter. There are two types of endoplasmic reticulum. We have the rough endoplasmic reticulum, which is studded with ribosomes and helps to synthesize protein. Then we have the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, which functions in lipid metabolism and detoxification of drugs and pesticides. So those are the two types of endoplasmic reticulum. So here we have the rough endoplasmic reticulum. This is our protein here. That's our messenger RNA and our rough endoplasmic reticulum. So these are proteins here that have been synthesized and they're carried through this transport vesicle, and you can see the protein inside the transport vesicle being transported, and you can see the stages involved in that process of the synthesis of protein by the ribosome and how they are transported through this transport vesicles. Okay. Okay, so that's the process involved in the production and transport of proteins inside the transport vesicles. So the other type of cytoplasmic organelle we have is the Golgi apparatus. Some call it Golgi, but I like to call it Golgi apparatus. Doesn't matter how you pronounce it, provided you spell it correctly. So a Golgi apparatus modifies and packages proteins, and it produces different types of packages like your secretory vesicle. Okay, yeah, so let's continue playing that again. I see the thing has stopped. I wonder why. Okay, so let me pause and see if there are any questions up to so far. So far, are there any questions? I'm just having a bit of difficulty here with the thing disconnecting. But are there any questions or comments so far? So in summary, what we have been saying about the cell, what you need to note about the cell, understand that every cell has got three parts. So first you have the cytoplasm. Well, before the cytoplasm, you have the cell membrane, and then the cytoplasm, and then the nucleus. So your cytoplasm is the space between the outermost covering, which is the cell membrane or plasma membrane, and the middle part, which is the nucleus. Every cell has got that. So that's the thing that is common with all cells. So when we talk about a generalized cell, it's a typical cell that has these three components, as well as other components within the cytoplasm. So all other components that you have inside the cytoplasm, they are known as cytoplasmic organelles. So the organelles are like little microscopic organs inside a cell that together make up the cell. And what you have inside the cell in terms of the cytoplasmic organelles is actually dependent on the type of cell and the function of that cell. For instance, a cell that is a nerve cell will not have the same function and structure as a blood cell, say a red blood cell. And because their functions and structure are different, you will also notice that the cytoplasmic contents are also vastly different. So the cytoplasmic contents will be dependent on their function and what they're supposed to be doing as a cell. Okay, let me see if I can put back that video so we can just finish that part. Yeah, give me a moment. Okay.
Okay, got it back.
The cell membrane. There are also microtubules. And there are all sorts of organelles, and we're going to look at those organelles and the different functions. Let's start with the mitochondria. The mitochondria is regarded as the powerhouse of the cell. So mitochondrion, singular, mitochondria, plural. The mitochondria are powerhouses of the cell. They can change their shape continuously. They can carry out reactions where oxygen is used to break down food, and they provide ATP for cellular energy. Remember ATP, adenosine triphosphate. The other cellular organelle within the cytoplasm is the ribosome. The ribosome is made up of protein and RNA and is the site for protein synthesis. You can find them in two locations. You find them floating freely in the cytoplasm or as part of the rough endoplasmic reticulum. So let's go back and see. That's our rough endoplasmic reticulum, okay? And they contain ribosomes, or you can find the ribosomes floating freely. Okay. The next organelle is the endoplasmic reticulum. It is a fluid-filled tubule for carrying substances, so it's more like a transporter. There are two types of endoplasmic reticulum. We have the rough endoplasmic reticulum, which is studded with ribosomes and helps to synthesize protein. Then we have the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, which functions in lipid metabolism and detoxification of drugs and pesticides. So those are the two types of endoplasmic reticulum. So here we have the rough endoplasmic reticulum. This is our protein here. That's our messenger RNA and our rough endoplasmic reticulum. So these are proteins here that have been synthesized and they're carried through this transport vesicle, and you can see the protein inside the transport vesicle being transported, and you can see the stages involved in that process of the synthesis of protein by the ribosome and how they are transported through this transport vesicles. Okay. Okay, so that's the process involved in the production and transport of proteins inside the transport vesicles. So the other type of cytoplasmic organelle we have is the Golgi apparatus. Some call it Golgi, but I like to call it Golgi apparatus. Doesn't matter how you pronounce it, provided you spell it correctly. So a Golgi apparatus modifies and packages proteins, and it produces different types of packages like your secretory vesicle, cell membrane components, and lysosomes. So here's an example of a vesicle we have here. This one helps to transport protein. Okay, great. So that's the Golgi apparatus. So that's our rough endoplasmic reticulum. You can see all the attachments of the ribosomes. So what more do we have? Our Golgi apparatus here. These are those vesicles that help to transport proteins that have been synthesized. Okay. So let's see the different stages. This is a protein in a cisterna. Here's a membrane. That's the Golgi apparatus. And that's a transport vesicle here that helps to transport protein. Here's the pathway 1. You can see all kinds of proteins in the vesicle as they're being transported out of the cell through the cell membrane, okay, or plasma membrane. Okay. So the Golgi vesicle containing protein to be secreted becomes a secretory vesicle here. So you can see all the proteins in it, and it carries it to the cell membrane. It opens up to excrete it through exocytosis. Exocytosis is the movement of substances out of the cell. Okay, so here's another pathway from here through the vesicle, secretes the substance out. Okay, here's another pathway here, pathway 3. Again, you have a secretory vesicle here. The Golgi vesicle containing digestive enzymes become a lysosome, and lysosome fuses with ingested substances. So these are all processes involved in the transport of different materials out of the cell. The other type of cellular organelle is the lysosomes. They contain enzymes that digest worn out or non-usable material within the cell. Then, of course, you have peroxisomes. They are membranous sites of oxidase enzymes. They help with detoxification of harmful substances like alcohol and formaldehyde. And they also help to break down free radicals in the body. They replicate by pinching in half, so that's how they divide. Then we have the cytoskeleton. Cytoskeleton is a network of protein structures that extend throughout the cytoplasm, and they help to provide the cell with a kind of internal microskeletal framework. So here are different types of cytoskeleton elements, but I'll just keep that because that's not too important for us for now. So another type of cellular organelle is the centriole. They are rod-shaped bodies made of microtubules. They direct the formation of mitotic spindle during cell division. And we shall talk more about this mitotic spindle when we look at the different stages of mitotic cell division. There are cellular projections that are also found within the cell membrane. You don't find them in all cells. You only find them in certain cells, depending on the functions of those cells. Among them, you have the cilia, which is used for movement or to move material across the cell membrane. You find them in the respiratory system to move mucus in the respiratory system. Another important one is the flagella. Flagella is found only in sperm, so that's the tail of a sperm that helps to propel the sperm to give it momentum to move around. And the only flagellated cell, which means the only cell in the body that has a flagella for movement, is the sperm. It uses the flagella to swim. Okay, so those are just examples of the cellular organelles. There are others, but those are just a summary of the cellular organelles. I think there should be a chart somewhere that shows some of these organelles, but if we don't have them in this slide, I think I'll have to find them and I'll send it through WhatsApp so you can, I think I have something, a table that summarizes all of these cellular organelles, and I'm going to share it in the WhatsApp group later on so that you can all have it in one place, in one page, where all the cellular organelles are summarized. Okay. So if at any point you have any question, please do not hesitate to let me know. So at this point, I would like us to take another short 5 minutes break. Actually, it's not a break. We'll stop here for today. Looking at the time, we'll continue from here again on Tuesday in class. So, Calvin, Makubela, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, good morning to everyone. I would like to ask, so here, when you mentioned vacuole, so on these animal cells, so I want to know, like, is it important now a vacuole?
Vacuole?
Yes.
Yes, every cellular organelle is important, but the degree of importance depends on the function of the cell. So whether you're talking of vacuole, whether you're talking of the Golgi apparatus, whether you're talking about the mitochondria, each one of them is important. But the degree of importance depends on the cell, because some cells don't have vacuoles. Some cells don't have Golgi apparatus. If you look at a red blood cell, what is inside? Nothing. It's empty. So what do you need vacuole for in there? What do you need Golgi apparatus? It doesn't need all that because of the kind of function it performs. So remember what I said, that what you have inside the cell depends on the function of that cell. If the cell doesn't need it, you don't need to have it. You don't need to have a horn as a human being on your head if you're not a goat. You fight with other means. You don't need to have furs on your skin because you put on clothes. You don't need to have spikes like a porcupine. That's not how you defend yourself as a person. So the fact that other animals have it doesn't mean you must have it. No. What you need or what you have depends on what you are designed and wired to do. So if the cell doesn't need it, it doesn't have it. If it needs it, you get it in abundance. If you look at cells that store fat, they have huge vacuoles and little else, okay? Because those vacuoles are required as storage space for fat. So they have lots and lots of it. Cells that don't need it, they don't have it. They don't need it. They don't have it. So what you find inside the cell is related to the function of the cell. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, it makes sense.
Okay.
So, but I wanted to know, like, cause like I agree most of the what you call them, the cells, they store food, like except that blood cell and others. So I wanted to know, like, in this chapter that we're in, are they not important? Because, for example, let's say for cells that are in our what you call in our skin, they also store food. So I wanted to know, like, are they not important now?
What kind of food do they store? Because if you look at the function of the epithelial cells in the skin, yeah, some of them store fats, okay? But it depends on which parts they are. So because they store fats, and fat has a kind of thermoregulative and protective effect. Like if you look at the layers of the skin, the third layer, the hypodermis, there's fat there, so you get lots of those cells that store fat. But if you look at a nerve cell, for instance, it doesn't store any fat. It just, the function of a nerve cell is transmitting of information. So you don't need anything else that does not facilitate transmitting of information. That's excess baggage. But for those that have function of storage, and don't worry, we're going to look at those cells individually. So here we're just describing a generalized cell. And we're saying for a generalized cell, there are three things that are vital, apart from everything else. These three you must find in every cell. But the rest you will not find in all cells. These three, the cell membrane, the cytoplasm, the nucleus, you must find it in every cell. That's why we looked at a generalized cell. But as you go from cell to cell, what you have in the cytoplasmic content or cytoplasmic organelles will differ. You won't find everything in certain cells. There are some cells that have nothing. I gave you an example like the red blood cells. There's nothing in there because you don't need them. It just transports oxygen and small amounts of carbon dioxide. You don't need all those other organelles. They just clog the space and create excess baggage. But for cells whose primary function is storage, yes, you have plenty of organelles that facilitate that function. So every organelle is important, but not every organelle is contained in all cells. That's the bottom line.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, then, if there are no other questions, I think we'll stop here for now. We'll continue from here in class on Tuesday. But please go through the rest of the notes on the videos on my tutor so that when we meet in class on Tuesday, we can go through quickly. I'm also going to post the notes on WhatsApp so you can have the slides and go through them as well. Okay, that's all for now. See you on Tuesday. Bye.